Over the past week, you've been hearing a lot about threats and free speech and free expression during the Trump era. You've, of course, heard all about the suspension of Jimmy Kimmel's show after an intense campaign of government and corporate pressure, first by Trump's FCC attack dog, Brendan Carr, on ABC, and two conglomerates, Sinclair and Nexstar. Nexstar requiring his approval for a multi-billion-dollar merger with Tegna, which would give it more access to local markets and you, as news consumers, fewer choices about what you watch in local markets, in a campaign of media deregulation and pressure from Trump's attack dog in the FCC. You know about those threats to free speech and free expression and the free flow of information. What you might not be aware of is the case of Mario Guevara. He's an Emmy Award-winning journalist and the only known journalist who is right now in immigration detention on U.S. soil, pending possible imminent deportation. And what got him in immigration detention? Well, over a couple of decades ago, Mario Guevara fled to the United States from El Salvador, where he built up a life in the United States with his wife and children, a very prominent career in the Atlanta metropolitan area. He has won a Southeast Emmy Award, nominated for that award multiple times, and he went independent with a news organization he called MG News. He reaches hundreds of thousands of people with his videos regularly. Millions of people follow him. And he covered the No Kings protest. Was arrested on that day. The charges collapsed immediately. But it didn't matter, because right after those charges collapsed, immigration officials transferred him into immigration detention, reopened a 13-year-old case, and have argued in court that his journalism is a danger to the community. On today's show, on All Rise News, on Legal AF on the Midas Touch Network, I'm going to be speaking to his attorney at the American Civil Liberties Union about his case and why this is a free speech issue everyone watching this show should care about. Joining us to talk about Mario Guevara's case is Vera Eidelman, a senior staff attorney with the American Civil Liberties Union who represents Mr. Guevara. Vera, thank you for joining us.
Thank you so much for having me.
And tell me, just broadly, for viewers who are not aware of Mario Guevara's case, who is Mario Guevara? When did he come to the United States? What brought him to the United States? And tell me a bit about his career and his family.
Mario Guevara is, by all accounts, a wonderful person who is also a journalist, who has been a journalist both in his home country of El Salvador and then since coming to the United States in 2004 here for more than 2 decades. He was a reporter initially with one of the biggest Spanish-speaking newspapers in the country, and then recently opened his own news outlet called MG News that focuses in part on live streaming information, just getting information out to people as quickly and as accurately as possible, including about law enforcement operations that are happening in the metro Atlanta area. And his reporting is followed by hundreds of thousands of people and is very useful to people who want to know what is going on with law enforcement nearby. And he initially left El Salvador in 2004 because of persecution he was facing for his reporting, and has been here for more than 20 years doing his work as a reporter.
And he's built up a tremendous career for himself. He won, as I understand it, a Southeast Emmy Award and was nominated for that award multiple times before he went independent and has a pretty wide reach. What happened this year at the No Kings protests that ended with his arrest?
This year, on June 14th, he attended a No Kings protest outside of Atlanta in his capacity as a journalist. He was live streaming. He was filming what was happening at the protest, including law enforcement activity. And he, along with many other people, was ordered to get onto the sidewalk at a certain point. He complied with the directive as much as he could, but he was then, because officers were coming toward him, ended up getting back onto the street and was arrested for a traffic misdemeanor. Those charges that were brought against him were dropped within days because the prosecutors concluded that he had in fact been complying with all orders. But in the meantime, he had had an ICE detainer lodged against him and had been moved to ICE detention.
And as I understand it, he's the only known journalist in ICE detention on U.S. soil. Is that correct?
My understanding is that he is the only person in ICE detention who was in detention because of his journalism, because of his live streaming activity, because the government is arguing that he must remain in detention precisely because his recording, publication, and discussion of law enforcement activities constitute a, quote, danger to the community.
And that's what's put his case, among other things, on the radar of press freedom groups as well. So, as I understand it, what happened after the charges were dropped? A judge ordered his release. What happened then?
An immigration judge ordered his release after determining that he was not, in fact, a danger to the community or a flight risk, on bond. His family and his attorneys all went to try to pay that bond to get him out of detention, but they were told that ICE was going to appeal that bond order and that Mr. Guevara would not be released. And the government then proceeded to appeal through the immigration court system, the bond order, asking the Board of Immigration Appeals to basically say he cannot be released on bond, and continued to make the same argument at least 4 times, that the reason he had to remain in detention was specifically because he records live streams and talks about law enforcement activity occurring in public.
And that began, this whole ordeal began at the No Kings protests in June 14th. We're talking close to 100 days now, right?
Yeah, that's right.
How many judges have ordered his release?
The immigration judge in the case that we just discussed ordered his release, and he also, in his immigration case that had been administratively closed since 2012, so for 13 years, the government and he had agreed that essentially his proceedings would be stayed. There would be nothing that happened in his immigration case, and so he was able to be in the country and was living the way that you and I live, fully released as a result of those proceedings as well.
And the government filed an emergency application to keep him in detention. I'm going to read from your habeas petition, the ACLU's habeas petition on Mr. Guevara's behalf. You wrote, in this notice of appeal, the government states that Mr. Guevara is a danger to the community because Mr. Guevara had, quote, on 5 separate occasions recorded or live streamed, end quote, law enforcement officers and, quote, posted videos of undercover agents, their vehicles, and tag numbers. The government further states that local law enforcement reviewed the respondents' public posts and learned that the videos were viewed by hundreds of thousands of people. Now, we're seeing in Trump's second term the emergence of immigration forces that are going around the country wearing masks, sometimes not identifying themselves as law enforcement. We've seen them pick up college students, not identifying themselves. What does this rationale mean to the ability to film law enforcement, period?
We're also increasingly, for what it's worth, seeing DHS claim that quote unquote doxing, or in other words, identifying and talking about what law enforcement officers are doing in public, is violence, is unlawful, is harassment. And we're seeing in the last week or so increasing requests for subpoenas that would unmask online accounts that are simply offering information about law enforcement officers, including ICBP officers, engaged in exactly the raids that you just discussed. And I think it is crucial for people to know and to understand that the First Amendment protects your ability to record, to film, to talk about law enforcement officers engaged in their duties in public, whether that's a DHS officer, whether that's a police officer. And it's essential because it's our ability to witness, our ability to talk about what the government is doing, our ability to hold the government to account, sometimes to criticize, almost certainly to criticize, but also to just get accurate information out. We have to be able to talk about what the government is doing if we live in a democracy and have any hope of changing or supporting what the government is doing.
You talked about the government increasingly likening filming law enforcement to violence. Homeland Security Secretary Kristi Noem used that exact analogy. Do you think that Mr. Guevara's case is that unconstitutional idea in practice being targeted specifically for filming law enforcement?
Very much so. And I think that's why it is a threat to press freedom. And I know that it is chilling journalists as well.
And right now, Mr. Guevara, he's spent a great deal of time in solitary confinement. Just how much time and what justifications are the government citing to put him in 22-hour-a-day solitary confinement?
His conditions are quite difficult, I think, for him. The government is arguing that it is for his safety. And he has been in solitary for, I believe, close to 3 months now.
And the United Nations has said anything but more than a few days could amount to torture. How has he been holding up? How has his family been holding up?
I find him to be an incredibly impressive person across all counts. I think he has been remarkably resilient, though, of course, there has been difficulty for him and for his family. I think his family relies on him for a lot of emotional and also practical support. He's the main breadwinner for his family. He provides a lot of support for his son, who is medically compromised following surgery that he had a few years ago. And he is also the main reporter and support system for his news outlet, MG News, where he supports younger journalists, but is really the person who has connections and is able to learn about and therefore report on what's happening in the community.
As I understand it from an ACLU press release, he faces an imminent threat of deportation now. We've been hearing about threats on free speech and free expression over the past week with the suspension of Jimmy Kimmel's show and other news. Are you surprised how little this news story seems to have penetrated in a week that is dedicated to free speech issues, free expression issues in the news cycle?
Hopefully we can change that together. And I do think that it is a story that reflects a lot of the dangers, and not simply in hypothetical terms, unfortunately, that we are facing in the country today, including to press freedoms. So I do hope that more attention comes to this, more sense of the injustice that is present here is brought by the public. And certainly, I hope that Mr. Guevara is not imminently deported.
And since the beginning of Trump's second term, we've heard a lot about Trump's relationship with El Salvador, where Mr. Guevara fled persecution back in the early aughts. We've been hearing a lot about Trump's relationship with the strongman leader of that country, Nayib Bukele. To put it mildly, Mr. Bukele does not have a warm, open relationship with his country's press, does he?
I would agree with that, yes.
Tell me a bit about the press freedom situation in El Salvador and the threat that your client faces if he were to be deported there.
This is a threat that he faced even in 2004. It's what led him to come to the United States, where he hoped to exercise his First Amendment rights fully. I hope the irony is not lost on people that he fled precisely because of his reporting in El Salvador, and now he may well face very serious and irreparable consequences because of his reporting in the United States.
And how are people who are watching this video now, who might be alarmed about his situation, how could they support him and support his family?
keep eyes on what's happening in his case. Make sure that your elected representatives and others in the government know that you think this is wrong, unjust, unconstitutional, and keep the pressure on to make sure that he is not removed from this country.
Thank you very much, Vera, for joining us, for telling us Mario Guevara's story. Please keep us informed about developments in his case, and we'll keep an eye on it here in All Rise News. If you want to watch, folks who are watching right now, if you want to get more information about this case, visit www.allrisenews.com. You can subscribe to that, and we will keep on top of this story. We have covered it in the past, and we will keep covering it in the future. Thank you once again, Vera.
Thank you so much.
Can't get your fill of Legal AF? Me neither. That's why we formed the Legal AF Substack. Every time we mention something in a hot take, whether it's a court filing or a oral argument, come over to the Substack. You'll find the court filing and the oral argument there, including a daily roundup that I do called, wait for it, Morning AF. What else? All the other contributors from Legal AF are there as well. We got some new reporting. We got interviews. We got ad-free versions of the podcast and hot takes. Where? Legal AF on Substack. Come over now to free subscribe.